Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's clearly a very busy day for everyone. Some folks may be arriving a little late, including me, due to traffic, but we're going to start right now so we can get underway because we are looking at a very tight schedule and want to keep everyone's timing in mind. Before I begin, let me introduce myself. I am Kate Baldwin of CNN and CNN International. I hope you had the opportunity to catch one of my programs at some point. I don't normally show up late because I'm on TV, but I did today, so I apologize. There is bad traffic, which is not a breaking news alert for all of you that we're looking at right now. The task, let us begin. It's an honor to welcome you all to the United Nations Private Sector Forum. The task over lunch today is to dig down and come to a better understanding of how we can all work together to meet two critical global challenges. You're all very well aware of them. Achieving sustainable development and responding to vulnerable migrants and refugees, those vulnerable populations which is facing our world right now. The big questions today to keep in mind as we begin this discussion is how can work in one area reinforce the efforts in another one, and how can progress with the Sustainable Development Goals, or I will refer to them as SDGs, since I love a good acronym, as we well know at UNGA we do. How can progress on SDGs help prevent instability around the world? Business action, you know better than I, plays a key role on both fronts, and that's where our focus is today. A few quick housekeeping notes. I have the unfavorable job of having to be a taskmaster today. We are looking at a very tight schedule. I will be a strict timekeeper. I don't know what that means, other than I will not come aggressively at you on the podium, but I'm going to ask all speakers stick to your time. And to assist you, we have given a very handy-dandy countdown clock right here. If you have ever watched CNN, you know we love a countdown clock. So I feel right at home as I'm looking at my time is ticking down right now. Second, we want to invite you to continue the conversation throughout, online, via Twitter and Facebook, using the hashtags hashtag UNPSF and hashtag Global Goals Local Business. That may be near the 140 character limit right there, but good luck with that one. On that note, let us begin. Let me welcome first Lisa Kingo, Executive Director of the United Nations Global Compact. Ms. Kingo will tell you very quickly. It has been a very busy 12 months for her and the group with the launch of the Global Compact's Making Global Goals Local Business campaign, and now today's Partnership Passport, which you have all received today, showing how the UN and business can work together. We'll get to that a little bit more a little bit later. So let me hand it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Kate. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome so many inspiring leaders of government, business, civil society, and the United Nations to this private sector forum. We have some of the world's greatest problem solvers in the room here today to help fast-track progress on the SDGs. Address the needs of vulnerable migrants and refugees, and tackle global instability. In the words of our Secretary General, achieving the world we want will require unprecedented cooperation, radical innovation, and extraordinary leadership. This is exactly the spirit behind this forum, bringing leaders together across sectors to build partnerships and to work together in new and bold ways on shared priorities. On behalf of the UN Global Compact and all our partners, I want to thank each of you for joining us today in the spirit of collaboration. It is now my great honor to introduce Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who has made enormous strides in the past decade to deepen relationships between the UN and business and foster a culture of partnerships to address global challenges. Secretary General, thank you for your leadership on so many fronts.
Thank you very much, Liz Kingo. Your Excellencies, Mr. Moens Liketov and Mr. Peter Thompson, the Presidents of General Assemblies of 70 and 71st, respectively, and co-chairs of a UN high-level meeting on General Assembly to address this large movement and refugees, and distinguished heads of state and government, and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss how we can work together for a more sustainable future. 1 year ago, UN adopted 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals and also very historic Paris Agreement on climate change. These are all for people and planet and for our peace and prosperity through partnership. Now we are talking about partnership, global compact. That was sustainable development, climate change, humanitarian need are interconnected and nothing can be operated, implemented in isolation. We need some comprehensive way of addressing this issue through a partnership among governments, United Nations, business communities, and civil society. This is a main theme of our meeting together. Governments have reached these historic agreements, but these agreements and promises must be translated into action on the ground for the people, for our planet. Now we have to secure the way forward to 2030. We have a very limited time. 15 years may be long, but it can pass. My 10 years passed unbelievably fast. I have only 3 months to go. So I cannot believe. In any way, we have a limited time, limited resources. We have to mobilize our full resources and full power and potential. Now is the time for governments to integrate sustainable development goals, agendas, and Paris Agreement into your national policies. And I have been urging world leaders to take a personal ownership, a strong ownership. And if possible, if you establish a small or big or medium-sized monitoring team, 17 goals, the ministers are all different in charge of ministers. And they will have some competing priorities. And sometimes it makes a lot of bureaucratic traffic jams. So it needs to be resolved by the President and Prime Ministers directly under your leadership. That's my main message today. Otherwise, it will be very difficult. Now, Global Compact can play a very important role. Global Compact has less than 17. It has 10 principles, but it covers all, again, 17 goals. Or business management, labor management, human rights, or transparency, accountability, anti-corruption, and good governance, etc., etc. All these are something which should also be incorporated, keep in mind in implementing all these issues. Nearly all the United Nations entities are involved and are partnering with the companies and the civil societies. And therefore, we are one team, and I'm asking you to do your utmost effort during your time. Your terms of mandate are all limited like mine. I am 10 years, you have 10 years or longer, but during your time, I sincerely hope that we will see this world and the 7 billion people who can live a more prosperous way, healthier way, with all this, our planet Earth, environmentally sustainable for our succeeding generations. Thank you very much for your strong commitment leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary General, for your reflections and for your leadership, as you well pointed out, that went by in the wink of an eye over the last decade. One of the cornerstones of the legacy that you do leave behind, of course, as you discussed, the Sustainable Development Agenda, it leaves no room for complacency. As we all are sitting in this room here today, we know that very well. Now let me please introduce His Excellency Peter Thompson, President of the 71st session of the UN General Assembly and co-chair of the UN High-Level Meeting of the General Assembly to address large movements of refugees and migrants. When President Thompson took office just last week, he committed to, in his words, turning the wheels on SDG progress while also ratcheting up humanitarian efforts. Mr. Thompson.
Prime Minister Trudeau, Secretary General, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This time last year we were celebrating the adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. It's clear that 1 year on, the governments around the world have been putting in place the agenda in terms of synchronizing it with their national plans, and I think that governments and national planners and certainly diplomats all know about the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and the 17 goals. I personally am convinced that over 95% of humanity knows nothing about them, either the agenda or the goals. And it's my mission during the 71st session to make sure that is not the case in a year's time. Every human being has to understand that these 17 Sustainable Development Goals are their rights and responsibilities. Why? The stakes are very, very high. You only need to look at SDG 13, which is the climate change SDG, to know that we are placing our grandchildren's place on this planet and the generations that come thereafter in jeopardy if we do not all embrace the 2030 agenda and the 17 development goals. So that's the challenge before us. I have established within my office a team headed up by Ambassador Williams from Grenada and made up of people from the World Bank, from UNDP and all over the place to work on nothing but implementation of the SDGs throughout the next 12 months. Within that team there is a private sector outreach expert, and we are going to be putting the challenge to the private sector as to how you can join hands with us in taking that message to humanity, to making every human being understand how high the stakes are for the implementation of this agenda. So we see it as something that governments, the UN, international financial institutions, the private sector and civil society all need to be forging new ways of doing business coherently, efficiently and effectively. You know, looking around the world, we see armed conflict, persecution, natural disasters and the search for opportunity, and they're all driving one of the largest mass movements of people in history. The answer to this instability lies in achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. I've been involved in development all my life, and I know that if you create the right conditions in a community, that community will be happy, stay where it is, and be a positive contributor to a nation. Well, that is why we must achieve these SDGs. At the moment, you know, there are 135 million people who are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. It's critical that we support these desperate people and address the root causes that are causing them to flee. And that's very much, of course, what today has been about with the Refugees and Migrants Summit happening throughout this building from early this morning till late tonight. So as I say, the 2030 Agenda is at the heart of achieving the kind of peaceful and loving world that we all want. Accelerating pace of climate change is adding new challenges, and we have to pay tribute to our Secretary General for his steadfast work over the years in achieving the Paris Agreement. And we are ahead of target, I believe, so in terms of ratification. And for those countries that have not ratified, we're putting the pressure on for them to get there. But we're ahead of target on that, so good news on that score. So if we don't step up our efforts to counter climate change, the number of displaced people and the duration of their displacement could rise sharply, straining global systems, global relationships, and the global market. For small island developing states such as my own, I come from Fiji, we know that no country is immune from the devastating impacts of extreme weather effects that are coming with climate change. The world insurance industry is stressed. The world insurance industry is looking at, what is the limit where that will be reached one day, where if we continue on the current track of CO2 levels in the atmosphere, at what stage does insurance just become too risky? The risks are too large. There are too many extreme weather events for insurance system to continue. So that has been addressed in a very serious way by the international insurance industry. And I can tell you it's somewhere between 3 and 4 degrees that trade becomes uninsurable. So this is something, again, the stakes are very, very high, and we must be involved. So we must all be involved. So I urge all stakeholders to work together in identifying new and innovative, I heard that word innovative before, SDG financing options, and to increase dedicated resources towards the SDGs implementation. And the welfare of our future generations depend on it. I thank you for your participation today, and I look forward to working with you all during the 71st session.
Thank you so much for that. Everyone hears your mission, and I think shares in the mission, and also knows that everyone in this room needs to come together to achieve your goal of next year, everyone knowing about the 17 goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda. I want to introduce right now there's a crack in the floor. There's your breaking news alert. I would like to introduce now His Excellency Mr. Mogens Lykketoft, President of the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly and co-chair of the UN High-Level Meeting of the General Assembly to address large movements of refugees and migrants. Under Mr. Lykketoft's leadership, last year the General Assembly unanimously adopted the Sustainable Development Goals and moved very quickly into action on them. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much for having the opportunity to address this very important lunch today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants is a historic achievement and urgently needed, as we are seeing these mass movements of people crossing borders and seas in search of peace, security, and opportunity. Over the last year, I have been witnessing the commitment of the private sector to work with governments, the UN system, and civil society in support of refugees and migrants. And it is a continuation of the private sector's strong commitment in formulation and implementation of the existentially necessary Sustainable Development Goals. We need exactly the expertise, the energy and innovation of the private sector to strengthen our efforts to leave no one behind. And the millions of refugees, migrants and displaced people are among those who are right now left the furthest behind. There is so much to be done, and it has to be done now. The New York Declaration provides an opportunity and a framework for the private sector to engage more closely, to energize, deliver, and assist create economic opportunity, education, and health. Focus on the SDG implementation to the benefit of the most vulnerable people will also, of course, help address many of the drivers of migration and lead us on the path to a more peaceful and harmonious world. In closing, I wish to thank Global Compact and Executive Director Lisa Kingo for hosting this luncheon. I urge you all to continue fostering constructive partnerships in order to support fulfillment of the commitments in the New York declaration. I thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. When it comes to action on refugees, our next speaker has been on the forefront. This struck me, and I wanted to just share this bit with you. When welcoming a plane of Syrian refugees as they arrived to Toronto, hitting ground for the first time there this past December, the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, he said this. He said, "We get to show not just a plane load of new Canadians what Canada is all about, but we get to show the world how to open our hearts and welcome people who are fleeing extraordinarily difficult straits." A simple message, a powerful message, though, especially from his position to send to everyone around the world. It's my pleasure now to introduce Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you all for being here today. It's important that we're all here, and I know that you're all very busy people with a lot of demands pulling you in very different directions. So I appreciate the time you took to be here, because not just the SDGs are important, not just the work we do in general here at the UN as leaders and civil society, but the business community plays an essential role in creating the success that we need in the coming years. But to start off, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to spare you the full sales pitch, because if you're in this room, you already understand the value of cooperation between business and government, and you know how important it is that the business community takes on its share of responsibility for building a better world. In 2016, building a better world means building a global economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthiest 1%. And not just those who had the privilege of being born in a country like Canada. And it's that focus on inclusion that I want to talk with you about today. Last year, my team and I went door to door all across Canada. We met with Canadians. We asked them to identify the things that were most important to them. And the one message we got during the political campaign more than any others is that they wanted a real and fair chance at success. Real opportunities to build a better lives for themselves and a better future for their kids. Well, 11 months beyond that election, I think we're well on our way to making that positive vision a reality for more Canadians. But we haven't done it alone, and I think that's key. Every major policy initiative we've introduced, we've done in consultation with others, with other orders of government, with active and engaged citizens, and of course, with the business community. Because when your goals are as big as ours, when you want to do nothing less than strengthen and grow the middle class and build a clean and sustainable economy that works for everyone, you have to have business on board. I'll give you a few examples. As a government, we can make historic investments in infrastructure. But we need the business community to translate those investments into good, well-paying jobs for Canadians. We can pursue more open trade. But again, we need business to be our partners if we're to make the most of those expanded opportunities. And that connection, that shared responsibility, is true even when it comes to the challenges that go along with responding to a refugee crisis like the one in Syria. Last fall, in response to a great and growing need, we proposed a very ambitious resettlement target for Syrian refugees. And we knew that if elected, it was something we were going to have to move on very quickly. Not because it was politically expedient to do so, but because every delay meant lost opportunity. Lost opportunity for the Syrian families who wanted to rebuild their lives in a peaceful and prosperous country, and for Canada too, which has always benefited from the resilience, ingenuity, and astounding work ethic that immigrants bring with them. Et c'est vraiment important pour moi de donner aux Canadiens, aux citoyens, aux membres de la communauté d'affaires, toute la reconnaissance qu'ils méritent pour ce qu'ils ont fait pour aider les nouveaux arrivants à se sentir chez eux au Canada. Notre gouvernement a fixé la cible mais nous avons atteint notre objectif en grande partie grâce aux Canadiens qui se sont rassemblés pour aider ceux qui étaient dans le besoin. Des voisins, des amis, des membres de même communauté religieuse et à plusieurs reprises des collègues de travail qui sont devenus des parrains privés. At every step, Canada's business community was there. At the corporate level, Canadian businesses donated tens of millions of dollars to relief efforts to help migrants still living in refugee camps, and millions more to other settlement, training, and education programs to help new arrivals to Canada. Our small business community stepped up too, raising funds, collecting winter clothing, providing meeting spaces for private sponsor meetings, and so much more. From one end of the country to the other, businesses have done what they can, leading in important, dignified, and touching ways. In Surrey, British Columbia, the owner of a grocery store chain who immigrated to Canada from Punjab as a child delivered free baskets of food to Syrian refugees as they arrived in honor of a kind neighbor who once did the same for his own family. In Fredericton, New Brunswick, a local modular home manufacturer has offered training and employment to Syrian refugees so that they can fulfill their commitment to build homes for one of Canada's First Nation communities. To help their new workers integrate, the business accommodates prayer schedules and other needs. À Montréal, des immigrants issus de zones de guerre à travers le monde travaillent côte à côte dans une usine qui fabrique des meubles. Leur employeur, un immigrant lui aussi, donne aux arrivants un emploi stable, en plus de les aider à s'intégrer dans leur nouvelle vie en leur offrant des cours de français. Chacun de ces exemples illustre un même objectif, celui d'assurer que ces nouveaux arrivants se sentent les bienvenus, qu'ils se sentent valorisés et appréciés, d'assurer qu'ils s'intègrent plus rapidement pour qu'ils puissent à leur tour apporter une contribution positive et durable à notre pays. But Canadians are not just engaged at home. Abroad, Canadian business leaders like Frank Giustra have done amazing work to make it easier for vulnerable migrants to find a place to live. Last November, Frank went to Lesbos in Greece and to help set up a reception center to offer shelter for 1,500 refugees arriving by sea. He went back just last March with members of Vancouver's search and rescue team to help the local authorities save more lives. If there's a lesson to be learned from Canada's experience, I hope it is this, that all parts of society must have a shared role in building successful, inclusive world. It is up to each of us to do what we can, where we can, to help migrants and refugees build better, more stable lives for themselves. So thank you for all that each of you have done in your own communities and businesses to give migrants and refugees the optimism and the sense of belonging that is humanity's collective birthright. Let's keep up the good work. Merci.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Trudeau. As the Prime Minister kind of mentioned, a key in any partnership is realizing the connections between all of us, making the most of it, capitalizing on it. That leads perfectly into our next two speakers, business leaders who know a great deal about the power and potential of connectivity. I want to welcome to the stage now Mr. Mats Granryd, Director General of GSMA, and Mr. Kaan Terezilu, Chief Executive Officer of Turkcell. Gentlemen.
So, what a great honor it is to be here at this fantastic setting, this fantastic lunch. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished guests. I am really honored to be here today as we explore how government and the private sector can collaborate to promote sustainability and in doing so, improve the lives of billions of people around the world. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with GSMA, we are an association representing 800 mobile operators, which is roughly all the mobile operators on the planet, and 300 technology companies across the broader mobile ecosystem and adjacent industry sectors. Collectively, our members connect nearly 4.8 billion individuals. So the reach is very, very good. Today, it is nearly impossible to imagine a world without mobile. It is something that many of us take for granted. We check the weather, we verify the traffic, and remain in touch with our loved ones, just to mention a few things. But for many, many others around the world, mobile is having a much, much more significant impact on their everyday lives. For some, the impact is nothing short of transformative or life-changing. For instance, more than 400 million people in developing markets who previously had no access to formal financial services now have mobile money accounts, helping them to lift them out of poverty. Mobile is providing access to needed health services. There are now more than 1,000 mobile health applications, enabling the use of mobile devices for health services and information, a quarter of which focuses on women's health. And mobile offers a critical lifeline in times of disaster and humanitarian crisis, from reconnecting families displaced by conflict in Syria, for instance, to the recent earthquake in Italy, where mobile networks ensured communications amongst emergency responders, provided information to citizens, and enabled fundraising to assist affected populations. As an industry, we now have an important opportunity to leverage the mobile networks that we have built and to service the delivery to help achieve the sustainability development goals. It is not just about providing connectivity, it's about what this connectivity enables. It's about connecting everyone and everything to a better future. The mobile industry is fully committed to achieving the SDGs, and today we're publishing a report, the first of its kind, that outlines the mobile industry impact on individuals, societies, and economies around the world, in developing and developed markets. And this is the report. It's a really big, thick one, but it's a great report. So I hope that you can all read it. The 2016 Mobile Industry Impact Report establishes a benchmark through which we will assess our industry's progress in contributing to the SDGs, and outlines our commitment and future outlook to ensure progress. As a commissioner of the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, I will be using this blueprint to encourage other industries to commit to the SDGs as well. The mobile industry is already having significant impact on the goals, many goals, particularly number 1, no poverty, SDG number 4, quality education, 9, industry innovation and infrastructure, and 13, climate action. But we can dramatically increase this potential in the years ahead by working together to connect the unconnected and continue to innovate. To further galvanize the mobile industry around the SDGs, we have partnered with the United Nations and Project Everyone to develop the official mobile app, SDGs in Action. SDGs in Action, remember that, which celebrates mobile innovation, shares best practices, and engages citizens in support of the SDGs. I encourage each one of you to download the app and get involved. So with those words, I would like to thank you, and I would now like to introduce and welcome Mr. Kaan Terzioglu, the CEO of Turkcell, to share his perspective on the power of mobile addressing humanitarian crisis. Turkcell recently became a signatory of the GSMA Humanitarian Charter, which focuses on making networks more resilient and facilitating more effective coordination with governments' humanitarian response agencies. I'm very pleased to share that to date, more than 100 mobile operators over 75 countries have committed to the Charter to support humanitarian response and improve preparedness in disasters. Kaan, please.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. General Secretary, it's a great honor to be here, and we are very proud to be the supporter of the GSMA's Humanitarian Connectivity Charter, as well as the UN Global Compact. Fostering development through socially responsible business is really key for our future success. We are very well aware of that. As UN as well emphasizes, nations and countries they do not diminish their economies by immigration. On the contrary, immigration contributes to the success and the progress of the nations and countries. As myself, who has been a member of a family subject to a population exchange back in 1922, I truly believe in the power of immigration and how it can contribute to the country's development. Talking about opening hearts, Turkey has opened hearts to 3 million Syrian refugees over the last 3 years. It has been really amazing to see those people who are not because they are poor, who did not have the means to live in a country, move the borders and trying to find a new place to live. And I believe Turkey has shifted the focus now from talking about the inflows and risks of displacement to integrating these people to the lives so that they can have a quality life and basically a future to survive. 50% believes that they will continue to stay in Turkey for the next 5 years. And 57% has been in Turkey for more than 2 years. 2/3 of these people, they have no idea about their homes back in their country, and they have a family, they have a future to look at. And I'm very glad to see that 1.2 million of these people are our customers. The utmost important thing for my company to make sure that we treat them as valuable customers that has very specific needs. And that's why we are investing heavily to make sure that their communication needs are catered for so that they can be connected to the people that they have left behind and also connected to their relatives which may have moved on to other countries. Looking to this amazing group of people, potentially a treasure for a country, we have about 500,000 children at the age of primary school, 480,000 of them. And they have a great potential, if they are educated in the right place, in the right way, to become scientists, engineers, and astronauts, or else to show their anger in any form, if not done accordingly. So that's why, as Turkcell, we have been trying to make sure that they have the best tools to survive and also to integrate into the daily lives. We have developed applications for their use to make sure that they have access to government services. They are informed about what's going on in their home countries. They have capabilities to learn a language that they are going to be living in a new country. And it helps them through the latest technologies, voice-to-voice translation from Arabic and Turkish. It's an application called Hello Hope, and it was launched last week for the use of our Syrian customers. We have not stopped there, but also implemented infrastructure, especially in the southeastern part of Turkey. 6 times more infrastructure than we have done in the last 21 years, opened up Arabic call centers so that we can better serve these people. This photo, if you are seeing now, is a painting done by 7-year-old Nur, basically painting his house being bombed. It's sad to see these people with these traumas, and we have to help them to make sure that they are getting up to their lives with. And this is Hamid, 6 years old, and from Aleppo, and now calls Istanbul home. We have to make these people feel at home, and we will do our best to do so, because we can. Thank you very much.
Just want to give a friendly plug. He said, don't forget, so I'll repeat, SDGs in action. That's the app we should all be looking for next. But wait until after lunch. Thank you both so much for sharing how your industry, how you individually are really trying to take the challenges and work with them, and take challenges and turn the challenges of sustainable development and humanitarian need and turn them into opportunity, not only for the business community, but for those who need the help and need it now. I want to welcome to the stage now one more business leader, our final speaker before the hard work begins and we'll begin our roundtable discussions. Mr. David Abney, Chief Executive Officer of UPS. He's going to now share how his company and the industry are taking on this very same challenge.
Good afternoon. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished guests, just really honored to participate here today and to be a part of this discussion. I knew when I walked through those doors this was going to be a pretty meaningful event. About 20 cameras all went off at the same time. Then I noticed that Prime Minister Trudeau was right behind me. And Kate, you do not have to worry about me being on time. I've worked for UPS for 40 years. I will deliver in the time. All right, so we talked a little bit about the need in the world and the importance of all groups working together, government, civic organizations, and then of course businesses. And we've heard from a couple of businesses. No one organization, no one nation, no one stakeholder can go it alone. There's just too much to be done. So we certainly, as the other speakers, also believe in multi-stakeholder engagement and robust public-private partnerships. We'd like to talk a little bit about UPS and our role. We're committed to being a part of the solution. Part of the reason is because it's a core value of ours. Another reason is every tragedy, most every tragedy that happens in the world happens in one of our neighborhoods. Think about it for a minute. We have 440,000 employees. We're in 220 countries and territories. And we have hundreds of thousands of customers in these places. So it's personal to us when something occurs. We believe in playing to our strengths. So our sweet spot is a combination. It's a combination of the philanthropic funds that we, of course, bring to the table. But it's also about our people. And the fact that our people want to volunteer and they want to bring their expertise. And then we have this global supply chain that is really tailored to meet things like emergency shipments to most any place in the world. In fact, our people are so involved that one of my first acts as a CEO 2 years ago was to announce that we're committing by 2020 to have 20 million volunteer hours by UPSers throughout the world. And that is not because they have to, that is certainly because they want to. So just give you a couple examples. One was the recent Ebola crisis where we played and UPSers played a critical role in making sure that we get supplies and medicines to the area and get it there on a timely basis. That effort also led to the Pandemic Preparedness Supply Chain Coalition, which is a proactive attempt to mitigate the impact of future pandemics. UPS, working with the World Food Program, the World Health Organization, and our close private sector partner, the Henry Schein Company, all making sure that we have supplies and materials in place before a disaster happens. Another example is we're working with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Zipline, a robotics company, and the Rwandan government to make sure that we utilize drones to be able to deliver medicine and blood and vaccines to the most remote places in the country, places that are hard to reach to by roads. So in summary, our support for private sector includes the World Humanitarian Summit, the UN Connecting Business Initiatives, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the UN Global Humanitarian Lab, and the International Humanitarian City Innovation Hub. So we believe that collaboration with all three groups is very important. There's a lot to be done. We absolutely believe that working together we can make this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So now it's time to take a little bit of a break from at least hearing my voice or people speaking up here. Now we can focus on each other and kind of actually turn and speak to everyone at your table. Time to roll up your sleeves, time to get to work, everyone. Each of you is seated at a table focused on one of 4 themes today: building peace, empowering people, protecting the planet, and investing in prosperity. These 4 Ps, peace, planet, people, and prosperity, they're broad themes at the heart of the forum's global agenda and are especially relevant to the migrant and refugee challenges. The 5th P, of course, is partnership, one thing we've all been talking about already today and why we're all here, quite honestly. Each table has a designated leader to moderate discussions, and there's also a note taker, very efficient here today, to capture the key outcomes. What kind of outcomes are we looking for? Like discovering new ideas, new solutions, new commitments to action, new ways of working together in partnerships, or opportunities to scale existing efforts that are already there. To help break the ice and kick off conversation, we talked about these luggage tags, this passport. You each have a luggage tag before you. Each tag has a statistic. Each will help illustrate the challenges at hand. For example, one is, in 2015, less than 1% of the world's refugees were resettled. My luggage tag offered this one. Children make up nearly half of the world's displaced people and half of all refugees. You have approximately 30-ish minutes for discussion. Enjoy. Hello once again, everyone. I know you missed me so much, and we're back on track. I hope all of your discussions were rich and enlightening. We don't have time to go around the room. No one has time to go around the room and do anything these days to hear the summaries of each conversation, but there were note takers. They've been recording ideas and commitments, which will be shared in a meeting report after today's event. I feel like I'm in the perfect position right now to ask, I could actually shush a prime minister. I feel really bad if I have to do that. I'm looking at you. Just kidding. I'm waiting. Now it's not your fountain. Now you're the best student in the class. Ewan, you're in trouble. Richard, don't start with me. All right, so one key takeaway, no matter what theme you were discussing, one key takeaway I think we can all agree on. It worked in first grade, it works still. Thank you so much. One thing everyone in this room already knows is the task at hand is enormous. You don't need me to tell you that. If it wasn't a difficult challenge, none of us would be here today, and it wouldn't deserve all of your very precious time and attention to the issue. But the world's most vulnerable, they're counting on you. They're counting on the media, they're counting on all of you, every stakeholder involved to do something, and coming together in these partnerships is really the way to make it happen. With that in mind, we're now going to hear from a few global leaders to share their work in this area. First, I want to bring up and welcome Ms. Simona Scarpaleggia, Chief Executive Officer of IKEA Switzerland. There she is.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at IKEA we believe in people. We believe when people come together to discuss about the world we want, about the future we want, then things happen. And we saw it last year when leaders of the world gathered in Paris to commit to reduce emissions in order to contrast the negative impact of climate change. We saw it also with the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. At IKEA, we are committed to do our part to reach these goals, also in the spirit of the 10 principles of UN Global Compact. We have a long-standing commitment and a long-standing engagement for migrants and refugees. Labor migration can bring positive things, but can also put people at risk. And the dream of a better future can become a nightmare when people have huge debts connected to the recruitment fees they get, and sometimes this can even lead to bonded labor. So we are IKEA are committed at supporting and protecting migrant laborers through our supplier code of conduct called IWAY, and through a cooperation with the Organization for International Migration. We also have a partnership with the UNHCR, where through sales campaigns, yearly sales campaigns, we sell selected products in our stores worldwide, and this generates donations from our IKEA Foundation. Through these campaigns, we raised 30 million that supported UNHCR, providing renewable energy and education programs in refugee camps, thus impacting 280,000 people. When the streets and the railway stations in Europe filled up with refugees last year, we were proud to see our co-workers stepping up, feeling the urge and supporting, devoting their time and money for people in need. And also IKEA Group contributed. We created a fund last year in September that supported these refugees in Europe with products such as mattresses, beds, children's items, in order to meet the basic needs. But now the question is, how can we go beyond? How can we just not help for the basic needs, but make possible for people to build a new life in a new country? As we believe in people, we believe that everyone has a talent, no matter where you come from, no matter how far you have traveled. And in IKEA Switzerland, we have launched a project that will last 3 years. Through this project, we will hire 100 refugees. We will offer internships for 6 months. During these 6 months, they will have the opportunity to work, to network, and also to access intercultural training, the same training that also their local colleagues will attend. Through that, then, they will get our reference, but they will also be able to access positions in our organization. So our mission as a company is to create a better everyday life for the many people. If we manage to help people build a new life when they had to leave their everyday lives behind, then I believe we have been true to our values. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for that announcement of that commitment with those internships. That's absolutely amazing and admirable. Everyone should start doing that. UPS? How are we looking? I'm just trying to help. All right, I'm pleased now to invite Mr. Adwale Tinubu, Chief Executive of Owando PLC, up here.
Mr. Prime Minister, Secretary General, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start by laying a little bit of context for where I come from. I come from Nigeria, and it's a country of approximately 170, 180 million people that is known for a lot of things that are good, primarily a lot of oil, but is also known for poor leadership, which has caused us to underperform as we should in the global nation space today. But we have a new president, we have democracy is thriving, and things are looking positive. One of the things that we inherited, first of all, was a substantial drop in the oil price, which basically meant the economy was in free fall, and also a refugee crisis in the sense that we had the Boko Haram, which was as a result of as what you probably would call ISIS at the global level, but it's Boko Haram in Nigeria, which basically means Western education is forbidden, and it seeks to maim, bomb, and stop anybody from getting a Western education, and also deny the rights of women. In our case, we have set up a foundation which has been in existence for a long time, but our foundation is born out of a company I formed 25 years ago, which has become the largest indigenous oil and gas company in Nigeria. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation, which we started with less than $100 25 years ago. But it was born of people with with education, and our focus was in using education to propel ourselves out of poverty and into a global economy, using global best standards in everything we did, however difficult that was as we built our businesses. In the process, we realized that what we wanted to do was give back by virtue of creating a foundation, and our foundation was focused on education. In terms of education, we sought to adopt every school which we found in any location where we had an operation, whether it was an oil field, a gas pipeline, a petrol station, and we successfully did that across the country. We partnered, and we were very successful in securing support from Educate a Child in Qatar to support the girl child, and we had our mission was to get 60,000 girls enrolled into school on an annualized basis, which we're working on. We also partnered with DFID towards improving the quality of teacher training and standards and skills across our entities. Finally, we found ourselves in terms of becoming a refugee manager, in terms of creating schools in the poor, in the environment because of the internally displaced personnel, people, which has over 100,000 children which do not have schools to go to. So we focus on providing short-term schools for them, and we do have support from US aid to now move these children into permanent schools and permanent education. But I think that one of the key things, takeaways I have, is that the Millennium Goals, or the SDGs, are things which, to a certain extent, seem impossible to achieve. But at the end of the day, one of the key things is that the sustainability it creates is also very good for corporates. And it's particularly important in third world countries where you find the GDP of the countries being driven primarily by the private sector. The public sector is shrinking, and the aspects of contribution of governments towards these goals is very, very limited. Now, we've had great corporations built in our country, the private sector, particularly the indigenous private sector. We have a gentleman on your table, Jim Ovia, there, who's built a bank from scratch that's become one of the largest banks, a multi-billion-dollar bank. And at the end of the day, the question is, how do we now transfer these earnings from these corporations into driving these goals? And I feel that it's probably a good challenge towards for us in this room to say, how do we use the emergence of private sector growth towards driving the goals in the third world countries, because there's a lot they can do towards making a difference. I have a lot to talk about. I think I only have 3 minutes, so I think I step away now. Thank you very much.
See, countdown clocks work. Who knew? Thank you so much for your remarks. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce to all of you Ms. Carolyn Miles, President and Chief Executive Officer of Save the Children, to come up and speak.
Thank you, and hello to everybody, and thank you to Lisa and all of the folks at the UN Global Compact for asking us to be here. So I just came actually from a conversation on social impact investing across the way, and it struck me as I was listening to that conversation that we really need a new way of thinking about partnerships. If NGOs alone, or governments alone, or capital investors alone could solve the issues, we would have done it already. It would already be working. So I would just urge all of us as we're here today to think about what could we really do that's different from what we're doing today, because I really think we have to do that. You know, if we did that, no child under 5 would die of things we can prevent. Every child would have a basic education. No children would be trafficked or in harmful labor, because all of us want those things to change. It isn't a matter of want, it's a matter of how. So I would just urge all of us to think about that. I wanted to talk a little bit about something that was mentioned briefly just a few minutes ago, which is the refugee crisis. So for Save the Children, this is something we've been working on for many, many years now. And we just put out a report this past week to hopefully help people think about this a little differently. And what we did was we looked at if all refugees actually lived in one country, refugees and forcibly displaced, what would that country look like? So it's 65.3 million people. Half of them are under the age of 18. It would be the 21st largest country in the world. And I think even more urgent is it is the fastest growing country, 34,000 people every single day. are forcibly displaced. So if we don't grasp this, if we don't do something about this issue, it is going to set these 17 goals completely off. We've got to do something about that issue. We also looked at what would it look like for children. Very poor education rates, 4th worst in the world, actually, this mythical country. Many, many children dying of preventable deaths, far more than ever would have in their home country. The hopeful thing, though, is that if the people in this country were able to make the average wages from their countries, it would be the 54th largest GDP country in the world. So this is what I want you to think about, is the opportunity. Not, yes, we have the challenges, but the opportunity that refugees offer. So 2 quick things that I wanted to say about our corporate partners. We really need to change the public discourse, and there's 2 things that I wanted to mention today. Johnson & Johnson, we've launched a project with J&J called the Humankind Project, and it is really trying to take all those statistics aside, show people what refugees are really like. So we went to Germany and we filmed refugee families. It's all over Facebook, so please, please go look at it. It's important that we get this out to the public. There's also a great photo exhibit. I think it's right around the corner. It's sponsored by Pearson. Thank you very much. And again, these striking images of the children and the families who are real people. And I think we need to get our publics all around the world to think about refugees as real people. So along with all those statistics, that's really important. Save the Children is going to be making a big commitment this week to every woman, every child. Obviously, we can't ask all of you to make big commitments and not make ones ourselves. So we are stepping up for women and children this week as well. And finally, there is work that's being done, really important work with the Global Compact, a new way of looking at business and particularly children's rights. And yes, it starts with things like child labor, but it really looks at how do businesses take the rights of children into account and do their business differently. So I just want to thank you all for being here, for caring about these issues, and for joining us today, and think about that new way to do partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Miles, and thank you everyone that came up here for your words, and as you're talking about new ways of thinking about things, but also acting, and for the actions underlying all the words and all of your comments today. The final portion together, we are now entering that phase. Our next speakers, they're going to tie basically this entire conversation together in a very powerful way. Before they do that, on behalf of UN Global Compact, I do want to thank all of the partners who helped organize today's event. Also thank the generous sponsors for their support, Pearson, GSMA, Sky Power, thank you so much. And I now am happy to hand the microphone over to Mr. Richard Curtis, the mastermind behind Project Everyone's screenwriter, producer, film director, and we're also delighted that he's going to be joined by UNICEF ambassador and award-winning actor, Ewan McGregor. As they make their way up here, please look to the television screens and watch this very special new film produced by Mr. Richard Curtis for the Sustainable Development Goals.
I was refugee in Pakistan, I was refugee in Iran, I was refugee in Dubai, and now I'm a refugee in France.
Les gens, quand tu es handicapé, ils n'essaient même pas de voir ce que tu es capable de faire, mais ils te jugent à travers ton handicap.
The cures don't exist, and I can't just wave a magic wand and make my son better.
Haberme venido no fue una buena idea.
यहाँ की लड़कियां कुछ नहीं कर सकती।
लाइट रहित, उजियार रहित, हमरो बाल बचाव उजियार रहे। اگه me fumidan bem só nem bem مشكل nem خورد.
Porque se todo mundo tivesse alimento em casa, ela podia raciocinar. Então, poderia ser pobre, mas teria inteligência na cabeça para poder sair dali.
Parce que na mukili mutu azwa na mission na onza batindelai. Ngape na za mukili pona mission na ngai me nzambe ndayebi.
Algún día un hombre va a venir, pega un puño y pega un salto.
nga yor doom boo xam ne dafa silmaxa nga delloo siwaat sa xel ci yàlla nga téyewaat ko jàpp ci yàlla.
Ilo mba afaka ihany fa mba tsy hitovy am'le hoe toerana nisy ato tsony zany fa mba lasa ambonimbony kokoa zany izy dia tamiko moa ny reniny dia fa mihina teo zany anay telo miana.
Et je suis sûr qu'aucune misère, aucune pauvreté extrême n'est pas une fatalité. On peut la combattre.
It is 14 short years. I just want to say this would have been the proudest moment of my dad's life. He worked for Unilever for 40 years, and he would have been so excited to see me in front of such elevated company. He was profoundly disappointed that I spent my life making films about Hugh Grant falling in love and Mr. Bean falling over, so he'd be very, very happy here. This is a really interesting moment, I think, and I don't know if you feel this, but I was in a campaign called the Make Poverty History Campaign, 2005 at Glen Eagles, and I remember a few meetings with the business community, and they were profoundly grim. Actually, as we spoke to businessmen, they felt that we were fundamentally bleeding heart liberals. It was to do with government aid. It wasn't their business. And the atmosphere has changed so profoundly now. Business was deeply consulted on the new goals. You feel real movement, you feel real interest, you feel a real drive towards purpose-driven business, you feel a real sense that profits can come from working for things like these goals. You sense an impatience with token SCR, which looks good in the annual reports, but doesn't change people's lives in any way commensurately to the profits and powers of the companies concerned. And I would just say to you, as an advocate for these goals, as you leave here, be determined to take action. You are in a position of such power. When I started the charity that I work for, I was a dodgy writer, writing cheap jokes in cheap sitcom sets, and yet as a result of that, we've raised £1 billion from the public. And my sense is that when you open the door to people being able to do good things that they think will change other people's lives, it's extraordinary how keen people are to work through. And I can assure you that all of you are in a position of much more power than you think you are, certainly much more power than I was. We've raised $1 billion. You can make billions upon billions of investments, changes, and business decisions that can change people's lives. Business causes 70% of the jobs in the world. It must be central to giving people the chance to lead satisfying lives and making sure that their children have opportunity and education. I remember when I was in Kenya with a strange man called Simon Cowell, and we went to a house and there was a woman dying of AIDS because the pills had not been able to reach her. And as we shot the film, we realized that behind her was an advertisement for Coke. So Coke had been able to reach where the pills that had saved her life had not. You really do have the power to make the goals famous and to make them happen. And I do think famous is important, by the way. Let people know what you're doing. Let your customers know that you support them, because you can't fight for your rights if you don't know what they are. And then obviously making them happen is important, because every child whose life you'll be affecting is obviously as important as my child or yours. And I think of these goals, when we read so many depressing things in the newspaper, I think of the tortoise and the hare. The hare attracts all the attention, but we want these goals to move on and on and on till they win the race in 2030. And so I'm asking you, and the Global Compact has asked you, to go back and to take specific actions with your company, with your board, with your investors, with your shareholders, with your employees, and with your customers. Use your wisdom, use your money, use your brilliance at long-term planning, use your understanding of real economies and customers' real lives, take it seriously, invest a bit of money too. And politicians, make it easy for businesses to do things that can mean that they do the right thing. 14 years isn't a long time. Make every year count. Bill Gates says, it's interesting, that the last 20 years, the greatest 20 years in the history of mankind, because we halved under 5 child mortality. And what we want is for Bill to have to eat his words and say that it was 2016 to 2030 that really mattered. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce a wonderful man. He gave one of the defining performances of British cinema in his early film Trainspotting. He was Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is important. He's just made a very interesting film.
Northern Iraq earlier this year, that I really understood the devastating impact of the crisis. A crisis where the numbers are often so enormous that at times it may feel like we face an impossible challenge. But this is not a challenge that we can turn away from. And children must be at the center of our response. Children, their stories, their voices, the issues that they face must become the focus of international debates on migration and on displacement. One story etched in my memory is Mohammed's. Like thousands of children, Mohammed, just 10 years old, escaped Mosul when ISIS seized control in 2014. Iraq's second biggest city and its surrounding areas were sent into turmoil as ISIS sent 500,000 people fleeing, restricting access to food and basic services. I met Mohammed in Erbil, the capital of the Kurdistan region in Iraq. Mohammed and his 12-year-old brother are the main breadwinners for the family. Their father's been missing for years and is presumed to be dead. The boys make their living selling nylon bags at a local market, and they make about $4 a day, which the family uses to buy food, and it's just enough for them to survive. Mohammed's mother told me about the previous tent that they lived in one of the crowded displacement camps that I'd visited, and that it had caught fire and killed her youngest son, Mohammed's baby brother. I remember her pointing out the burns on Mohammed's hands. Since Mohammed fled Mosul, he suffered from severe behavioral problems exacerbated by the breakdown of his family. He was a quiet boy and he wasn't able to talk about the past, but thankfully now is receiving psychological care and attending a UNICEF-supported child-friendly space. I also met a little girl named Myrna, and as she walked me around the disused, half-finished shopping mall where she'd lived for over a year with 1,000 other families, she told me how the local community had donated food, clothes, and supplies and had come together to welcome those displaced by the conflict. And we all share this responsibility to show the same hospitality, to show the same empathy. For it's not enough for us just to be shocked by the stories of Mohammed and Myrna, but shock must be matched by action. The fate of Mohammed, of Myrna, and of the millions of children just like them is not within their control. They need protection, and they have a right to that protection. Whether refugee, migrant, asylum seeker, or displaced, children are children, and they bear no responsibility for the violence and deprivation around them. And unless we protect them, then we're risking their futures. As an ambassador for UNICEF, my role is to help to carry the voices of children like Mohammed and Myrna as far and as wide as I can, and that's why I'm here today. Our world leaders are gathering to decide how we respond in the name of humanity to children who need us now more than ever before. And we must protect children from violence and exploitation. We must help to keep families together, to keep children safe, and we must make sure that children have access to education and other quality services. Children who are denied education, health care, nutrition, and protection today are also denied a full opportunity to contribute to building prosperity, peace, stability in their societies tomorrow. Working together, each and every one of us has a role to play to contribute to national and global efforts to alleviate suffering, promote peace, and invest in empowering the next generation. As business leaders operating inside and outside affecting countries, you can use your experience, technology, resources, and influence to help prevent disasters, respond during crises, and contribute to rebuilding a safer and more peaceful society. You also have a responsibility to ensure that the supply chains are free of child labor, of trafficking, and that the jobs you generate through your enterprise allow decent standards of living for employees and their families. UNICEF and the UN Global Compact have today released a new document called Children in Humanitarian Crises, What Business Can Do. It provides guidance to companies on how to assess the impact of their operations on children, protect children from harm, and support efforts to empower them to become active members of society, which will in return help build resilient communities and business environments. These summits cannot be the end, but the beginning of our hard work on behalf of millions of refugee and migrant children. The summits will not solve everything, but they represent an important step, the beginning of a substantive conversation that will move us forward in addressing one of the biggest crises of our time. With truly concerted global effort and global action, we can together ensure that children like Mohammed and Myrna have a better, brighter, and safer future. Thank you.
That's all. We're done. Thank you, everyone.